Welcome to Beyond the Bleeds, the podcast that sheds light on life with bleeding disorders. Each episode shares real stories and expert insight to help you navigate life beyond the bleeds. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to Beyond the Bleeds. I'm your host, Heather, and I'm here today with a stand-in co-host, Erica, for John, because he's not here today. So, Erica, thanks for being my stand-in co-host for the day.
Thank you for having me.
And our guest today, she's been on once before? Is that right? Twice before? Okay. Is Angie Farrar, and she is our lead nurse coordinator from our Wausau office. And today we are going to be talking about detecting a bleed, just a refresher for people out there. Before we get started with that, we do want to do a little plug. The Wisconsin Bleeding Disorders Conference, which is hosted by Great Lakes Hemophilia Foundation, is coming back June 5th through the 7th, 2026 at the Kalahari Resort in Wisconsin Dells. Registration is open now through May 1st. So we would love for families across the state of Wisconsin to please go ahead and register and join us at this conference. There's programming for youth, teens, childcare for the younger kids, lots of different things to do, breakout sessions on some really great things. There's even, let me see here, yoga, sound baths, Spanish speaking sessions. So lots of opportunities for families. We would love for you to register. Let me just make sure I'm not missing anything. The weekend goes like this. Friday is a welcome. Saturday is the full day of breakout sessions, connecting with other families. And then Sunday wraps it up with breakfast and an industry symposium. So if you would like to attend this wonderful weekend, please register at glhf.org. And again, registration is open now through May 1st. That's glhf.org. Okay. Anything else you want to say?
No, I mean, it's a great opportunity for new families. So if you've never been, I definitely encourage you to check it out. Great way to meet new families, connect with your HTC staff outside of your comp clinic. So definitely check it out.
Awesome. Okay, Angie, we're going to dive in. So this is a refresher. We all talk about detecting a bleed all the time, but we want to get it out there. I think we've talked about it bits and pieces, but haven't had an entire episode dedicated to this. So can you briefly, we've had you on before, introduce yourself briefly and just kind of talk about your role here. It may have actually changed a little bit since the last time you were on.
Maybe. I'm Angie Farrar. I am a lead nurse coordinator in the Wausau location. So my main, my main hub is Wausau, but I do things for patients all throughout HOC. So I'm based in Wausau, but taking calls and doing everything for all of our patients and doing lead nurse stuff for both Wausau and Green Bay.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to get into the details of detecting a bleed, but just to kind of start off very briefly overview, why is early bleed detection so important for people with bleeding disorders?
Because the longer that a person bleeds, the longer that's not the word.
And take two.
Right? Because the longer a bleed sits in their system, the harder it is to stop the bleed and the more that they have problems in the future. So like for a joint bleed, the blood sits in their joint, starts attacking their joint. And then in the future, they start having more problems like arthritis and loss of range of movement. So we really want to get on top of the bleed so it's minimal and treated quickly.
Okay.
What are some of the most common types of bleeds this patient population typically sees?
Well, we see a lot of joint bleeds, but we see a lot of bleeds from injury. I think that's the majority of the bleeds we see is a lot of injury-related bleeds, trauma-related bleeds, and then after that, it's joint bleeds.
Okay. So what are some of the early signs and symptoms that you might tell a patient that a bleed is starting? What are they looking for?
So something is pain. They notice pain. That's pretty consistent for the majority of our bleeds. Obviously, if they see bleed or blood, they know they're bleeding, we want them to give us a call. But if it's something they can't see, like a muscle bleed or in a joint or something like that, then they're going to have pain. If it's in a joint, sometimes they feel tingling or like a bubbling sensation. So we just want them to be aware. If they're starting to lose range of motion and they have some pain, we want them to give us a call. Just watching for things that are not normal. If it's not normal, give us a call.
Mm-hmm. Are there like visible things that they'll be able to tell that a bleed is starting? Is it more like you're feeling a certain way?
Yeah, it's both. So the things that you can't see is that feeling of the bubbling or the tingling in the joint or in the area. But then as the bleed progresses, you'll start to see things. So you'll start to see swelling. It might turn red. You might see the bruise. I mean, bruising is a big thing for a bleed, but that sometimes comes later in the bleeding process. So yeah, it's a lot of swelling. We ask them to, when they call and tell us that they're having a bleed, we have them touch it and ask if it feels warmer than they, like if it's their elbow, feel your other elbow. Does that one feel warmer? Because heat at the area can be a sign of a bleed too.
Okay.
I know I've talked to some of our patients at camp, and I had one patient, and it stood out to me. He said, it feels like someone poured soda into my joint. Like that fizzy, that tingling, bubbly feeling.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that stood out to me when you said that, is that memory of him explaining what that feels like to him. And he's like, I just know when I get that tingly pop soda feeling in my, and I'm like, oh wow, that's interesting.
Yep. I had a patient once, because when we started, we were told it's like a tingling. So tingling to me, it was like pins and needles.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, so it feels like it's falling asleep. And the patient looked at me and said, absolutely not. It's like it's bubbling in there. You can feel the blood bubbling into the joint. And then when I heard the soda pop thing, I'm like, okay, now it's starting to make more sense. I've never had a joint bleed, thank goodness. Yeah. But I think I might maybe know what's happening if it ever does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the patient actually told me that was a Wausau patient. So it's funny. But so how can a bleed feel different from just everyday soreness or like a pulled muscle, growing pains if somebody calls and is questioning that?
Well, sometimes it doesn't. That's the thing. That's why we always want people to call when something's different and new, because it might feel like just a pulled muscle or it might feel like just growing pains, but it could just be a bleed. And depending on their diagnosis, they could have spontaneous bleeds. So there might not be the trauma injury to trigger, oh, this is a bleed versus this is just growing pains. So whenever there's a question, we just ask them to call. We ask a bunch of questions, figure it out. Some situations we might just wait a minute and see what's going on. In other situations, we're treating right away. So always err on the side of calling.
What would you say is something that's easily overlooked because maybe it's just too common? Like, are there signs that are easily overlooked by people because they're like, oh, this is nothing?
Yes, sometimes they're not easily overlooked, but people just choose to overlook them, I think. Like, again, going back to a pulled muscle versus a bleed. Well, a pulled muscle can lead into a bleed. So we have patients who maybe over-exercised or went on a hike and they're like, oh, my leg is sore because I used it too much. Well, then 2 days later, now their calf is super swollen and there's bruising because they had a muscle bleed from the activity. So it's overlooked because they can explain it away. But in hindsight, it's the same feeling of pulling a muscle as a bleed. So we don't want that. Again, going back to always call.
Yes.
If it's not normal for you, call and we'll talk through it together.
So when it comes to age demographic, do symptoms of a bleed look different for kids versus teens versus adults?
Well, not really, because a bleed is a bleed. The way it's portrayed looks a little bit different. Like for a little kid, say a 1-2-year-old who can't vocalize, hey, this is what's going on, you might notice a little kid is a little bit more whiny. He might, if they're crawling, they might start favoring the other side. They might just quit crawling all in general. And it might be because, they have a bleed in their hip or their knee. So we're telling parents to watch for that. Make sure that if something has changed, then you're checking them out. Look at their hips, look at their knees. I know with some of the kids that I've talked to the parents for, we're saying when you're doing a diaper change, just kind of move their knees and legs and see if they're letting you do it and just going on with life. But if you notice they're starting to slow down or pulling away from you touching them, let's look into that a little bit more. Whereas they get older, they can tell you what's hurting or what's not. And adults obviously can also vocalize that. So that's the biggest difference that I think we see is they present the same. It's just we're not able to get the information as easily from little kids.
The assessment, it sounds like it might be different. I remember when we had a mom-to-mom group, one of the moms was saying her child had not had a bleed yet at that point, and typically every morning he would reach over the crib when she would come in, like, Mom, come pick me up. And he didn't, and he just with one hand, and she's like, I just knew. Yeah. And I'm like, wow, that's got to just be wild to have that extra layer of thinking of why are they doing that?
Which is why we always say if it's something that's not their normal, then give us a call. We'll assess it a little bit more. And we'd rather have parents or anybody, even adults, call us and say, I don't know what this is, or I don't know why I'm feeling this way. Can we talk through it? Because we'd rather have them call us and we go through it together and it not be a bleed than them go, I'm just going to see what happens. And then it is a bleed, and then we have to backtrack and try to get on top of it.
Yeah. So kind of getting back to the kids thing, I always thought it was really neat, like when I would go with you guys to schools and things like that, and just the way that we have taught the kids. And, this is, even if they're not exactly sure how to describe it, or, I've been around the kids where they're just like, I know that if I fall, off the slide, like I might have a bleed. And so even like not the feeling of it, but just knowing even what could lead to a bleed, I think is fantastic. And just being at the schools and letting the schools know, and we go in and do things like that. But like you said, in the end, calling us and just making sure we know what's going on.
Yes, very important.
So when should someone wait and see? Or is that never?
I would say that's never the option I'm going to give you. We would rather have you, like I said, call first and we'll talk through it. We don't want to wait and see because there's just so many things that could go wrong with that situation when it's as easy as giving us a call. And then if we say wait and see, okay, great. But we'd rather have that on us and not on them.
I will point out that, at least in my time here, I have found that a lot of patients with a less severe bleeding disorder will kind of follow that wait and see mantra. Not naming names, you know who you are. You wait and see. Because again, severes or people with a little bit more severe diagnosis are more familiar with the signs and symptoms of a bleed. They just know their body, where people who maybe don't have bleeds or maybe they hadn't had one in years maybe aren't, again, unless you're listening to this podcast, you're not as familiar with the signs and symptoms that I think we see more of those patients wait and see, and that's where the damage is done.
Well, and I think the patients that haven't had any real major bleeds are also more likely to do the wait and see thing. We'll find out that they had bleeds when either we're, chart prepping for their annual visit, or they're on the phone saying, oh, I need a refill of my factor. Well, that's weird because we have down that you should still have 3 doses. And they're like, well, actually, so I had these bleeds and it didn't go away. So then I infused, and we're like, oh, then we take that opportunity to re-educate. Like, great, we're so happy you infused and you don't have a bleed anymore. But next time, let's go ahead and give us a call so that, one, we know what's going on. So if it escalates, we know the steps that were already taken. But 2, it also goes back into an insurance thing. We have to be able to track where the factor is going so that when insurance is like, wait a minute, they only have mild hemophilia. We've already dispensed 3 times this year. Why? We can say, well, they had this bleed and we're able to, paper trail that out for them too.
I know, that's a great point. Tammy and Jill in the business office would be loving that you're saying that right now, because the number of times really that the payers do come back and ask and request that information is almost always now. Where in the past they really wouldn't use those logs as much. Now they almost all of them are. So that's a really great point.
It is, yeah. And what about advice for people? Because we all know, I think we're probably all here kind of the same way, where it's like, I don't want to bother you. I don't want to reach out if it's not something that's a big deal. So I'm just not going to. What do you have to tell patients that are just a little, more like, I already know, I don't want to bother you. What if it's nothing?
Well, I'm still going to say err on the side of calling. We love to talk to our patients, for one. We'll talk and talk and talk. So, talking isn't a problem for most of us nurses here. But also, I think a lot of the patients feel like they are saving us time if it's nothing, but what they don't realize is if it is something, you're actually adding time on to us. Like to get on top of a bleed in the beginning is a lot easier than now backtracking and trying to get on top of a bleed. And then what if it's a severe bleed that now you're going into the hospital? Or what if it's something that you actually would have to have surgery to stop? Or it's something that could be causing like damage that you can't reverse. So in the long run, it's easier to call us and do a 5-minute phone call for us to be like, it doesn't sound like something that we need to be concerned about. We'll follow up tomorrow, as opposed to, you need to go to the emergency room. I need to call the ER. Do you have a ride? We got to find factor. And taking care of all of that. It's just easier to do it in the beginning.
Do you typically find that people that are like milds just have a harder time detecting a bleed because they're not really sure? Or do you feel like the milds are, they're the ones that are kind of like, I don't want to bother you because I don't do it as often? Or do you think they even have a harder time detecting a bleed?
I don't think it has to do so much with their diagnosis, to be completely honest. I think there's just certain people that just inherently don't want to be seen as a burden or bother anybody, so they just don't call. We have some milds like that. We have some severes like that, But going the other way, then we have the ones that know they're bleeding and are still like, we'll give it another 2 days.
Okay, so that's a takeaway. We love you all. Stop doing that. You're not burdening us. If you think you're bleeding, call us.
We want to hear from you.
We need work to keep our jobs. Remember that.
Now, don't go get hurt, but
call us with legit things.
Right.
What's one message you wish that everyone with a bleeding disorder would remember when it comes to detecting a bleed? If something feels off or doesn't feel normal, then give us a call just so we can talk through it. So I guess that's 2 things. If it doesn't feel normal, call us. Those are the 2 things we're looking for.
Yeah.
Because we want to treat that bleed early.
Anything that people can do to kind of help themselves be able to notice changes sooner?
Just being aware of their body, being aware of what they've done recently. If something feels sore, kind of think back what you've done, because those are some of the questions we're going to ask too, right? Okay. We want to know if there is an injury. Maybe they didn't realize they injured themselves, but like I had a patient say, I didn't hurt myself, but I jumped out of the back of a truck and it was moving and I came down pretty hard. Okay, well, I think we figured out why your knee hurts. Like, so just being aware and probably don't jump out of moving trucks.
That's a
good rule of thumb.
Bit of advice.
Another good takeaway for the podcast.
Right.
The last question makes me laugh, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If they're unsure or they need support, who should they call?
They should call the Hemophilia Outreach Center and speak with a nurse.
Right. Or your local HTC, wherever you are across the globe, because we're worldwide. Oh, yes. Yeah. So
you're right.
Right.
Any HTC you're affiliated with. Yeah. But if you're not affiliated with one, give us a call. We'll see what we can do.
Right.
Or look, and again, I think we have links on our bio for our podcast to be able to share links to find an HTC. If you're not hooked up with one, there is a link, a CDC registry that you can go and find a HTC near you.
Right. And one of the really cool things that we have too, and I don't know if other HTCs do it or not, maybe some of them do, but a texting line too. So if people want to send pictures, if that's easier for you, I know in this day and age, texting seems to be a lot easier for people than making a phone call. But even if you want to shoot us a text, and what's nice with that is like, again, you guys can ask for pictures, you can do it that way too, which is nice.
But if you're going to send a picture, make sure that you're sending some context with the pictures, because sometimes we'll just get random bloody pictures and we don't know why. So just throwing that out there.
Another takeaway, please put a description of some kind.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Wonderful. Anything else?
No, I don't think so.
This was a great refresher, though. I think it's good to have it out there so people know. And again, I feel like the biggest takeaway is call. Call us, call your local HTC, call someone. You're not going to be bothering anyone.
Right.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Erica, for being my wonderful co-host today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Angie, for being here again. I'm sure
Thank
we will
you.
have you back another time.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Bleeds. We hope this episode offered insight and connection. Subscribe for future conversations and visit hemophiliaoutreach.org for support and resources. Until next time, take care and stay strong.